जिंदा खुदा से दिल जो लगाते तो खूब था।
जिंदा खुदा से दिल जो लगाते तो खूब था।
मुर्दा बुतों से जान, मुर्दा बुतों से जान छुड़ाते तो खूब था।
Assalamu alaikum. So, shall we begin? Right, can I request Sabahat Ahmed for Tilawat, please?
Assalamu alaikum.
Welcome, Islam.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا أطيعوا الله وأطيعوا الرسول وأولي الأمر منكم، فإن تنازعتم في شيء فردوه إلى الله والرسول إن كنتم تؤمنون بالله واليوم الآخر، ذلك خير وأحسن تأويلا. The translation of the following verses is as follows. I seek refuge with Allah from Satan the accursed. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, ever merciful. O ye who believe, obey Allah and obey His Messenger and those who are in authority among you. And if you differ in anything among yourselves, refer to Allah and His Messenger, if you are believers in Allah in the last day. That is best and most commendable in the end. Jazakallah.
Okay, Jazakallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Right, so today the topic is same-sex relationship allowed in Islam? Now, this is a topic which many of you will have faced, and it's one of those topics which the answer, of course, is not really they're happy to receive it, but we have to give an answer. We can't just ignore this. So, because it is a very topical subject, this is why we felt that we will go through this today. And the same thing as usual, I will give a talk and then we'll open up for any questions, any comments that anyone would like to make. Right, so let's begin. So the way that I would answer this, as I said, it may not be very happy, but the way to answer is to get through some. First of all, Allah has forbidden any relationships of any kind. Doesn't matter about whether it's gay or not. Even a normal man and woman relationship is forbidden in Islam. The only thing is a legal form of marriage, and of course, that is a marriage between a man and a woman, not the same sex. So this is what we need to get them to understand, that all forms of relationship outside of marriage is forbidden in Islam. Doesn't matter who it is, who's it between. This is what we try to do. So, as I said, this is the main thing that they need to understand, that we have to strive to please Allah. And this is what Allah wants, that He wants us to create a good society. So Allah has informed us that we should get married. It's very important to get married, but of course, it should be boy girl. And by doing so, then that helps us and it helps the society, because through legal means of marriage, we can then have children and we can have a life partner, which of course we look to go beyond this life, not just this life, but the next life as well. Now, this is important, of course. If we don't have children, what's going to happen? The end of civilization. There won't be anybody else if we don't have any children. And likewise, everyone should be wanting some companionship, a life partner to go through life together, not just this life, but the next life. So, this is what Allah wants us. Now, to ensure that we do have the children, then Allah has made it a very pleasurable experience for us. And that encourages us then to have children. If it was something which was a horrible experience, then of course people would be reluctant no matter what is the end goal. But Allah has made this so that we do come together, we do have children. But of course, different people are having different ways and outlooks. Not everyone enjoys this. They understand that it's important because it's a means of having children, but that doesn't mean that they enjoy it. Some people do, some people don't. In a normal relationship, whatever it is, that is the way. So if a person now he is born differently, there's still nothing wrong with stopping that person from getting married to the opposite sex and having children and having a good relationship. Now, from my experience, I've found that many people who are gay, they still get on very well with the opposite sex. They have similar outlooks, and so they have good companionship with them. Now, of course, they may not enjoy having a relationship, but they can have a relationship. It is possible they can have children. And of course, this has been the way for many, many times. So, this is the main thing. It's not a question of enjoyment or running after the pleasure of the body. That is something which these days, especially, is being stressed upon, that we should be enjoying this. And this is what happens. There's so many different ways which they try to excite you to that's what you should be doing. But at the end of the day, what that does is then it creates this depraved society, not a righteous society, because through this running after the pleasures of the body, then all these different types of relationships and different things happen. And we see the result of that. That sometimes, unfortunately, you have unmarried males and obviously diseases and things like this. And basically, the society, they're not going after God, they're going after the pleasures of the world. So when you start running after your own pleasures, then of course, no matter what it is, greed and things like this will creep in, and that's going to affect the society. So we would encourage a homosexual that they should get married. Of course, they can have friends with the same sex, naturally, because obviously that's what they're more inclined to do. But they must not indulge in any sexual relationship outside of marriage. This is the step which, of course, naturally they would object to and say, no, 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 this can't be right. But as I said, this is the only solution, whether they like it or not. That's the only solution that we can offer. So, as it's sitting here, I'm not sure that this is not what they want to hear, of course, but this is the way that we would present it, and this is what should be actually followed by the church. It's quite disappointing to see the reaction of the church these days, that they are giving into man and not God. God has made it very clear in the Bible, in the Old Testament, of course, even in the New Testament. It is clear that this is not what should be the way. So we would expect this Christian country to be keeping to what God wants and not man. But unfortunately, that's not been the case. Now, as I said, if you look to the Old Bible, you see the example, the clear, very clear example of the prophet Lot. But think about it. How can two cities, Sodom and Gomorrah, how could they become so corrupt that all these different vices happened? And apparently both cities, they all became homosexuals. But actually, this was not the case. I don't think so anyway. More likely, what happened was that it became acceptable to run after the pleasures of the body. And when you do that, all these taboos, they become broken. And so I think that this two cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, they were running after the pleasures of the body and many things, not just homosexuals. It's been focused on homosexuality, but many problems could have arisen there to make that deprived society. Now, we should think about today's society. And the same things happened. What is the difference? If you go back to the early 60s, then divorce, homosexuality, unmarried mothers, abortion, these were all taboos at that time. Yes, they were happening, of course, but they were all buried underground. People were not talking about it. And if a person was involved in any of these things, if they became divorced, if they were homosexual or unmarried mothers or had abortion, it brought shame on the people. And that was only back in the 60s. That's not too long ago. But these days, what's happened? Now everything has become accepted. And so now no one can see any harm in, for instance, same sex marriages. Not only that, but actually it's encouraged. And if you start speaking out against this, people will turn on you, they'll condemn you and say, well, what are you saying? This is not right. You should be allowing these sorts of things. And so the society we have today is actually encouraging people to do these sorts of things. So this is the problem that we have. And this is the depraved society that unfortunately we're finding ourselves in. Now, generally, we understand, of course, there are some people who are born differently and they will be more inclined to their own sex. This idea that some people have saying that they're not born that way, this is wrong. Of course, we understand that some people are born in this way and they do have these strong feelings. But we're also seeing that in such a society like today, many homosexuals have become homosexual out of experiment. Not because they were born that way, but because it's the fashion, it's the way that all their friends are talking about it. And so actually encouraging them to get involved in these sorts of things. We see this pride concerts and things like that where straight people will go and they will get to there, they will show support and so on and so forth. And of course, once you start lowering down your barrier, then of course you can start getting involved in the very things like these. So when we see such a depraved society as we're in these days, if a prophet does come and warns them that the dangers of these sort of practices, then unfortunately these people will turn on them. Not just them, of course, even us. If we speak out, they turn on us. The same thing that happened to Prophet Lot would happen in this day and is happening in this day. That people are scared to actually say anything bad because people will condemn them. So sadly, we are living in the same sorts of society as in the time of the Prophet Lot, as in Sodom and Gomorrah. And this is why they need religion to help create that good society, good morals, before this society is punished. Well, it's already getting punished because obviously it's been over 100 years since the Prophet was sent. But as Allah punished those two cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, that can happen, and it is happening in this world today. So this is why we are calling these times the latter days. It's been something which has been warned about since the beginning, that a time will come where mankind will move so far away from God, running after the pleasures of the world, running after the pleasures of the body, that there's a need for a prophet. And so Allah has sent us Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad alayhi salam, and he has come to create a righteous society. This is what he wanted to see. This is what Allah wants. And of course, naturally, his mission is being continued today by us, by our Khulafa, by every one of us, we should be trying to create that good society, which means that we have to speak out on such things. Now, what we must realize is, and again, this is what I try and get through to people when I'm discussing this with them, that whole purpose of this life, think about it. What is the purpose of this life? The whole purpose of this life is not to run after the pleasures of the body, and it's not to run after the pleasures of the world. In fact, it's to run after the pleasure of Allah and to develop ourselves to become a better person, to raise ourselves morally, to come out that animal self into a higher spiritual being. This is what Allah has created us for. This is what Allah expects from each and every one of us, whoever we are. Because if we achieve that, then we develop that relationship with God and we find that true inner peace, which everyone wants, of course. So this is what Allah wants, to create this good God-fearing society. And through creating such a good God-fearing society, you can then create a peaceful society, which, as I said, everyone should want. Now, as I said, I often, unfortunately, have to speak about this. So a possible response that I have received when I explain what I've just explained is that a homosexual will never feel inclined to marry a member of the opposite sex. If they follow this advice, the advice that I've just given, then they manage to deceive their spouse, surely they will say that is not haram. So it's against Allah. It will be totally unfair to their spouse to marry someone who has no genuine passion or matrimonial love for them. It would be a very false companionship. So this is one of the responses that you're likely to get if you start pushing, as I said, what I would respond or inform them. Now, of course, they're correct. I totally agree with what they're saying. And there are many, many aspects of having a good marriage. And that involves, of course, love and mercy. Because if that is there, that will lead to a better and fuller marriage. And therefore, if you are happy within the marriage, of course, that's going to lead to procreation and then a continuation of the human life. This is what, as I said, Allah wants from every one of us. But that can't happen if there's a homosexual relationship. They can't have children. And so, as I said, the end goal will not be achieved. And if it continues and everyone's doing it, and finally, naturally, the whole society will become corrupt and will end because there's no children being born. Now, again, they will say, well, these days, of course, there are so many different ways, so much advancements in science that we can even have children. We don't have to get married to the opposite sex. We can have marriage to the same sex and still have children. But they've got to understand that Islam is for all times. And for 1400 years, this scientific advancement that we have nowadays was not an option. Even in some countries, it's still not an option as we're having today. If you're rich, of course, but there are many people who can't afford these sorts of things. So the only thing I can suggest is keep stressing this, that they need to understand that the whole purpose of this life is all about developing our love for Allah and running after Allah's pleasure and Allah's nearness. This is what we should be achieving. If we do that, then that relationship will continue into the next life. And that's what you've got to focus on, not the pleasures of the body. So this is what I try and get through to them, to understand the real purpose of this life. That running after the pleasures of the world and of the body, that's just a distraction. It won't help you to achieve your real purpose. So we are an animal that does like companionship, and it's important that we have good friends, we have good companionships that would help us in the problems that we face, all the trials and tribulations that we face during this life. And of course, we should be helping one another to develop our spiritual self. This is why we do congregational prayers and so on and so forth. We don't just go off and pray by ourselves. This is all very, very important. That's what we've got to understand what a marriage is about. It's about two people coming together, not just coming together, but striving with each other towards Allah, helping one another to achieve the end goal of pleasing Allah. And so love is an emotion which develops as you grow together. And the love creates naturally the mercy and tenderness that you will have towards each other. So it's a question of getting your mind right and fixed, not what your body is telling you and running after your desires, but looking after the end goal. So, as I said, this is the most important thing about relationship. And that relationship can have, no matter what your sexual inclination is or your feelings are, you can develop that good relationship with each other and develop your spiritual path. So this is the thing. A very small part, of course, is of the relationship coming together. But as I said, even for a normal marriage, sometimes there people don't like it, or sometimes you can't have children anyway. It happens. Many marriages they can't have children. So obviously, it's not just that. It's a question of having that spiritual path together. But unfortunately, as I said, these days, it's the sexual pleasure that has come to the fore. And we are constantly bombarded with running after this pleasure. And this is the problem, whether it is the internet or many different ways. There's all this temptation, as we said, that Allah, the devil, is trying to lead us away from God. And if we look around the world, he seems to be succeeding. He's moving people away and getting them, tempting them to run after the pleasures of the world. And so by doing so, they forget about God. They move away from the real purpose in life. And this is the difficulty that we face, that everywhere there are magazines, advertisements, shops, even friends are encouraging you that you should be running after the pleasure of the world, as if this is the main thing in life. As I said, you watch TV, this is all you see. It's just encouraging that to have these relationships, whether it is a relationship outside marriage or same-sex marriage or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, we have to understand this life, whilst it might seem a long time, in fact, compared to forever, it is a very short time. But because of this bombardment, we see that it's led to premarital relationships, adultery, fornication, unwanted pregnancies, divorce, and of course, the rise in homosexuality. So this is certainly not what Allah wants. Allah wants a God-fearing society, and it's important that we try to strive to please Allah. So no doubt, I agree, it is unfair for those that are not sexually inclined to one another. Yet, they are expected to make a good marriage and reproduce. This, like I say, has been the way. I mean, like I say, it's not something new. If you go back to the 60s, people, although they were homosexual, they did get married, they did have children. This is what Allah wants from us. And this is the only argument which we can really try and get through to them, that this is what we should be striving after, trying to develop that sort of relationship, one which Allah wants from us. So in Islam, of course, we have checks to create the best society. And one of those is, like I say, it doesn't allow courtship of any sort of kind outside of marriage. Because if that is there, then of course you do get the adultery, you get fornication. So this is un-Islamic. This is what we need to get them to understand. It's not just about homosexuality. A boy and a girl, the same thing applies. No relationship outside of marriage. Islam does not like abortion, of course, unless the mother's life is in danger, which again helps us then to prevent these relationships outside marriage. Because again, unfortunately, if it's easy to get rid of a life, then people don't really care too much. So these are there to help prevent such things. And same with divorce. There are many checks in Islam to prevent divorce. It is allowed, but there are prevention there to make sure that people don't just run in and get divorced so easily. But the main thing is, and again, this is what I try and stress to the people, we've got to learn to control our feelings and not allow these feelings to overcome us. And this, unfortunately, is what we're seeing, that people are not controlling their feelings, and then therefore they're running after the pleasures of the lust and the world. So, as I said, a person may be attracted to others, but we have to control those feelings, whether it is boy, boy, girl, girl, boy, girl, whatever. In Islam, it's only allowed to have a lawful marriage, which is a boy and girl lawful marriage. And of course, we normally have arranged marriages because that again prevents this courtship and unfortunately the weaknesses overcoming us. It can overcome anybody. So we got to make sure that we don't get tempted. And the same, whether it's in marriage or outside marriage, we need to be able to control all those feelings and not be overcome from them. So this is why we tell people that as soon as you start having those sort of feelings, you cut at the root. So if you start feeling any attraction to any person, whether it's at work, college, or whatever it is, the time is at the beginning. Cut at that root. As soon as you start feeling any feelings towards someone else, you've got to try and make sure you're not alone together and avoid developing such a relationship. At the end of the day, we've got to keep focusing on striving to please Allah. So therefore, for a homosexual person, as I said, we understand it's going to be very hard for that person, but they can marry, they can have a good, close relationship with the opposite sex, and they can have children. So this is the only thing that we can encourage them. They may not like it, but this is the only answer that we have for them. So yes, of course, running after the sexual pleasures, that will be missing on the advice that we're giving. But the advice that we're giving them is much better, that they should be running after the pleasure of Allah. And if they do that, then they will have Allah's pleasure. Allah will be happy with the sacrifices that they're making, how they're controlling their emotions. And so, inshallah, both people will attain the paradise together and be soulmates forever. As I said, we've got to get them to understand that if you run after the pleasures of this world, of course, it can be enjoyable, but it's only for a short time. Whereas the next life is forever. And of course, in the next life, there will not be this physical relationship. This is forever, but it'll be, again, soulmates, that you have the friendships and you're working together spiritually, not physically. So if we can be content with that forever, why can't it be content in this short time that we have here in this physical world? So procreation is only a way to help continue human life. But like I say, that won't be happening in the next life. But love and mercy, these will be in the next life, of course. Why shouldn't they be there? So that's the main thing that we need to be focusing on and developing our spirituality in this life so that we have a good journey into the next life. Now, before I put it to yourselves, there's another possible response. It may have come to your minds already. Again, they may say, when you've told them these things, that why? Why would Allah make someone homosexual and then expect them to marry and reproduce with the opposite sex? So again, it seems a weakness in Allah that He has made that person that way inclined. Yes, this is true. I can't say anything. People sometimes are born that way. But as I said, we've got to try and understand why Allah has created us and what is the expectation of man and what is our purpose. Yes, I quite agree, the feelings are there. But like I say, this life is all about developing your obedience, your submission to Allah. And by doing so, then you create that righteous and good society which everyone can lead into. So Allah wants us to control these emotions. The desires are there, no doubt. We understand that people do have the desires. We understand that people need to have relationships beyond maybe the marriage. But what Allah wants is us to overcome those desires and not give in to those desires. And if we do so, we can strive to become a better person. So Allah won't force us. Of course, Allah can. He can force anybody. But Allah has created us, and sometimes, like I say, there are people who are born homosexual. Allah's not going to force you in any way to do what He wants. He wants you to realize this. He wants you to keep striving to perfect yourself and striving to do good and obviously resisting evil. Whatever your condition is, whatever the way you've been born. But as I said, the only answer we can give for that is that Allah will not force His will on us. He wants us. This is why He's given us His life. He wants us to strive and become a better person. Okay, it's a long talk, but hopefully you got some questions. So now it's up to yourself to ask any questions or any comments, or as we normally say, maybe you face this when you've been discussing it with someone who is homosexual or anything like that. Maybe you've got a way of answering. But this generally is a way that I would try to answer. And I can tell you from experience, they're not happy with it. I told you that from the beginning. But that is the only way that I can answer them and try to get them to understand why we're here and what Allah expects from us. So any questions? Right, Manova Sahib, you've got your hand up.
Assalamu alaikum.
Right,
It's me, Sabahat speaking. So the last question, you could answer it that Allah tries different people with different trials. So he tries some people with this trial as well.
yes, I mean, that's what I was trying to say, that whatever Allah's created, He's not going to force you to do anything. So yes, I totally agree. I can't deny it that some people are born homosexual, but Allah's not going to force you. It's a trial that you've got to face, like each and every one of us as we're growing up. Whatever our sexual feelings are, desires, we have to control them and hopefully find a good marriage and work on that marriage. And then, as I said, that continues in next life. So yes, you're right. And these are the trials we have to face. Right, RH, you want to say something?
Assalamu alaikum. I have two questions. So the first one is that we should encourage people, even if they do have homosexual inclinations, to still be in opposite gender marriage. And obviously then that's a discussion they would have with a potential partner. And the other thing is it's pertaining to maybe friends or other people in society that you do know that, you know, for example, if they come out as gay, how should we carry on? Should we maintain contact with them, or how should we go about that? Jazakallah.
Okay, Jazakallah. I mean, the first one, obviously, this is what I've been trying to say. But as for someone who does come out, let's put it as a Muslim, for instance. If a Muslim says that he is gay and he comes out, it's the same answer, that all we can do is encourage. So this is one thing that I often say to the youngsters especially, that many of you know your friends, they may be having relationships, whether it's boy, girl, girl, whatever. But obviously, as our role, all we can do is try to guide them, try to encourage them that this is not what Allah wants. So as I said, they don't like the answer, of course, but if there is, for instance, a Muslim who is a gay, then we understand that this is his inclinations, but he still needs to control, he still needs to get married. Yes, I think he should explain to the girl before he gets married what his inclinations are, but hopefully if he explains it properly, then she will understand and help him. And like I say, they can have a marriage. It's not that they can't have a marriage. As I said, most gays that I know are very much inclined to the opposite sex. They understand, especially homosexual. He has many girlfriends as such because that's his likes. It's the thing that he enjoys. So they can be together, they can have a good friendship, so that can continue in marriage. That's basically what a marriage is. As for, like I say, having children, yes, he may not enjoy it, but as I said, there are many husband and wives who maybe one of them doesn't enjoy it, maybe the other one does. It's, you know, there's no guarantee in that sort of thing. That's how people are, but they get on with it and they have children. So all we can do is encourage them and explain to them that if that's your inclination, but in Islam, you are not allowed to have relationships. You can have friends, but not beyond that. Whoever it is, like I say, even if it's just a boy and a girl, same thing. You've got to control yourself. They don't like it. I know. I've had this discussion with many of them. They don't like it, and I can understand where they're coming from. But that's the only thing we can do is encourage them and try to help them to understand. As for Allah, He's made it very clear, and they can be punished by Allah if they do have relationships. So they could understand that as well. Ajna, you've got your hand up.
Assalamualaikum.
Welcome, Salam.
I wanted to ask, how do we go about problems? Like, there is the natural compassion for people who are discriminated for. For example, in Pakistan, you get trans people that are very discriminated and they don't even get a chance in society because of their, you know, sex. And how do you build that balance between following Islam, but then also fighting for these minority rights? Because I genuinely feel for those causes.
Right. I mean, if you fight for these rights, obviously some rights needs to be there. We've been talking in these talks about obviously what's been happening in America with the black people and so on and so forth. And these are sort of causes which you should be supporting. In this case, by supporting, then that's showing that you agree with it. And of course, we can't agree with it because God has made it very clear that He doesn't want this. We've got to create a good society. And so we've got to make sure that obviously you're known for the companions that you keep. So if you join a group which like Pride and things like that, Pride March, and you're part of that, you will be counted as part of that. Now, it becomes very difficult then if you're supporting it and agree with this to then speak out against it. You can't do so. So we've got to think about obviously pleasing Allah as well, and we'll be answerable for Allah in what we do. So if you support such things, there's a danger that you will lower again your own barriers because you're trying to support when you agree with, okay, there's some people there, I agree with what you're trying to do, but that then weakens your own barriers and you could fall prey to something, some dangers like that, maybe not in this particular thing, but in other things. So the society that we're living in, especially for you living in a non-Muslim society like this country, you face a lot of problems. And there's a lot of people who are pushing different ways, which for us, being righteous, trying to please God, we're against that. We can't agree with it. So it's a difficult balance. You can keep friends, you can advise, you can guide, but to support and encourage, I wouldn't recommend that. You have to say, look, I'm sorry that I got to always think of God. And,
can I
yeah.
just following up from that? I totally understand. Like, I'm not part of any Pride sort of marches or anything, and my support is just mere compassion for human rights. So in cases where here that's not a big problem, but that's why I gave the example of Pakistan, where trans people are kicked out of their houses and they can't get jobs or even ID cards, things like that. I think that's where I struggle a bit as well. I'm guessing fighting for anyone's human rights isn't bad, but I can, whilst not necessarily supporting their lifestyle.
as I said, it's a balance you've got to make. I agree with you that any injustice we should be speaking up against, and we shouldn't be, anybody who's homosexual or trans or anything like this, we shouldn't be persecuting them or anything like this, of course. We can support them a little bit in whatever way. But obviously, the main thing that we should be trying to support them is trying to help them to develop their relationship with God. And this is the struggle that they're going to have to make. It is a very difficult thing, whether you're gay, whether you are trans, or whoever. Obviously, that's a path that you are on. And for someone like us to come along and say, well, no, you shouldn't be doing that. Of course, they will feel that they're losing their rights and and people are turning against us and so on and so forth. But if we don't say anything, then this is what's happened. Because over, like I say, the 60s, and then it developed, people started not to say anything and started saying, well, it's okay, there's no harm. And then whether it was divorce, that was maybe the first things that started happening, that more and more divorces started happening. And then obviously abortions. At one time you couldn't do abortions, and then the law says yes, you can at certain things, and so on and so forth. So the barriers start getting knocked down, and then you get to that society that we're in today, which is unfortunately, whether people like it or not, is what we would regard as a depraved society. Is not a God-fearing society which we want to achieve. So yes, I mean, it's hard. You on one hand, you can understand and sympathize with people, but on the other hand, you still need to try to create a good society, because as the Prophet Islam said, it's just like having a house on fire, that if you ignore it or support it, then what's going to happen? The fire's going to spread and spread until eventually you come to your own house. So this is the danger for someone like yourself. If you're going to support it, that fire can spread to you as well. And before you know what's happened, maybe not in this particular direction of trans or gay, but other things in this depraved society may overcome you. And this is the struggle that we're finding with the youth today, that many of them are weakening. And so they're having relationships outside of marriage, for instance, and then coming to the parents and saying, well, now I want to marry this girl, or so on and so forth. And it's putting the parents in a strong, difficult position, and it can, of course, affect them and so on and so forth. But that's the problem. Again, going back to the 60s, it was very clear for Muslims, there was them and us. And so you had the Western society doing their things, drinking and clubbing and things like that. And Muslims tried to keep away with it, from that. But these days, going to university or college or anything like that, all your Muslim friends are also doing these sorts of bad things and encouraging you to come on, it's no harm, come on, let's do it. So this is the problem that you're going to have to face. You've got to bend but not break. So you've got to have some points for saying, only so far, I can support you only so far, but I can't go further because my faith does not allow me to do that. If you keep that up, then hopefully you'll stay strong. But once you go beyond that, then the danger is that this society can overcome you, and that's what no one wants to see. So it is difficult. I understand the difficulty, but we have to be still trying to guide people that this is not what God wants, and God wants a good God-fearing society, and explain what is the only solution. They don't like that solution. I know they don't. I don't think I've ever come across a gay person who has agreed with me. So I know they don't like it, but that's the only thing we can say.
Jazakallah.
Anybody else got anything they want to say?
Assalamu alaikum, Roisab. There's a question in the chat. It says that what's our stand on sperm donations?
I think, if I remember right, and I think Humayyu is here, he might know, the fourth Khalifa, Rahimahullah, explained this, that if it is husband and wife, then yes, that's okay. But if you're going elsewhere, then that's still fornication. So it's not allowed. So this sort of thing we don't encourage at all. If it's like say a husband and wife and they having, I forgot what the word is now, but they have that treatment, then for them it's okay. But for you to make sperm donation and you could be fathering hundreds of kids and you don't know, this is not what Islam's about. Islam's about responsibility, that the male has to be responsible for any children that he has. And if you don't know who your child is, or not interested because you're just donating, then this is not the way. So it is a form of fornication, so it's not allowed. That's what I can remember. Maybe Humayun, if he's still here, he might have been taught something and he might be able to answer that. No, I'm not seeing him. Okay. Anyway, that's what I believe. So it's not, we don't allow it unless it's husband and wife. Anybody else got any comments or anything they would like to say?
Sorry, Assalamualaikum.
No.
So just following up from the previous question, what does that relate to then with surrogacy? So if you do have sperm and egg donation from the husband and wife, would that still count as fornication?
I mean, it's a very difficult position. Often a person who is having someone else's child, there obviously is a bond between a husband, between a mother and a child, and it's very hard then to give up that child and to forget about that child. So it's difficult for a husband and a wife who can't have children. Obviously, they're looking into ways of having children, but really the only option that is really permissible, I think, is adoption. So this it creates more and more difficulties, and although it's a husband and wife, but you know you're using another body to develop, and obviously relations are going to be there. So it's going to be very, very difficult, I think, for any woman to give up that child, even though they knew when they went into it that this is what's going to happen. So as far as I know, again, we don't encourage it. I could be wrong, but I believe that's the case. Anybody else? It's all women today. That's good, mashallah. Normally women are keeping quiet. So anybody else got anything to say? As I said, this is a difficult subject. We brought it today because whether we like speaking about it or not, unfortunately, it is being raised. Whenever you do a bookstore or something like that, normally they'll come along a person and he will express that views, even if he's not homosexual or trans or anything like this. Still, he may just out of fun bring this question up. So we need to be having an answer. Whether they like that answer or not, we need to answer it. Aisha, you want to say something?
Assalamu alaikum. What if they can't find a woman to marry them and no woman want to get married to them? So in that case, I mean, they are not going to marry for the rest of their life because of the situation. I mean,
Yeah.
You said they have to explain it to the person, and probably if they explain it, maybe the women don't want to go into that kind of marriage. So in this case, I mean, what can they do? Why Islam also encourage marriage?
I mean, I agree with you. It's going to be difficult, especially for a woman. I mean, there's got to be commitment on the boy's side. It's not just, obviously he's expressing that this is my feelings, but he's got to be expressing also a commitment to marriage, that he wants children and that he wants a good marriage and he's going to work for that marriage. But for a lady, whether she wants to accept that and maybe where she feel where he's not going to do that, then of course it's going to be very difficult to find a woman who agrees to such things. But as I said, it's important that that person express this before the marriage, before any marriage. There are certain things in your life, in your past. If it remains in your past, fine, that's not a problem. You can no need to tell about the person before the marriage. But if there's something which will carry on into the marriage, then it's very important before the marriage that you say these things. So, for instance, if a person smokes, he shouldn't hide that from his future wife. He should tell his wife beforehand so she knows. Or if he's got some disease or he can't have children or something like that, or doesn't even want children, these are things which need to be said before marriage so that the wife can then take that in and agree or disagree before marriage, not find out after marriage. So if a person hides the fact that he is gay and then gets married and then tells the person that I'm gay, it's unfair for the woman that she was unaware of this. But as for finding a partner, yeah, I agree, it would be very difficult. Depends on his commitment and whether he is serious and he's going to commit himself totally to the woman and he's not going to have any relations outside of that. That is very, very important. But that's the same commitment that any person has to make, that when you're going to get married, you should go into that marriage because it's for life and not it should be a temporary thing or anything like this. So the commitment must always be there. If he doesn't find anybody to marry, Allah will understand, and obviously he won't be punished for that. If it's it's his way, he's made it clear. But if he has relationships outside the marriage and things like that, and of course he's going to be answerable to Allah. So there's no easy solution, but the only thing that you've got to be upfront, like I say, you've got to be honest, again for Allah's sake, and declare these things so that people you're marrying understands your true inclination, but also what is your goal, what is your determination. Of course, no one knows the future, but when you go into marriage, it should be that you're going to commit yourself to your partner, and everyone deserves that. So if you go into marriage and you're not willing to have that commitment, then whoever you are, whatever your outlook is, you should not obviously go into that marriage. You should be going into marriage totally focused on that marriage. It should be forever, not just this life, but for the next life. And if you can't find a match, it's unfortunate, but there's no, we can't say that, okay, now you can have a relationship with your own sex. That's not an option for us. So we can only discourage it. Of course, as I said, it's not for us to persecute the person or anything like that, but we can discourage that thing. That's all we can really do. Right, so anybody else, or shall we leave it there? Okay.
Sorry, Mrabsab, I just had a question as well. Just wanted to ask from sorry, as an argument for Tabligh purposes as well. As you mentioned at the beginning, when someone would ask you about this and make a comment, and you would explain to them, that the purpose of life, and we should be more inclined towards God, and what do you call it? Sorry, physical and all of this kind of worldly things. We should not, we should try to avoid that and try to, find the pleasures of God. How can we basically, when we are explaining this to the people who ask these questions, how can we kind of make them more inclined towards, in regards to, for example, following the, going towards God, and putting these kind of arguments for them to make more attractive that, the purpose of life is, to worship God, and that's what our, this is the purpose of life. How can we kind of put this argument more prominent and more stronger and a bit more attractive as well towards these people?
I don't know about attractive, but obviously, as I said, with anybody, we need to explain to everyone, in fact, that this is what Allah expects from us, to develop ourselves from this animal self to a higher spiritual being. Now, when I've discussed with a few gay people, I've given them the book Philosophy and Teaching of Islam and said, look, this will help you in that spiritual journey to develop. But that's for everyone, no matter what your sexual inclination is. We all have to go on that journey. This is the jihad for us, that we got to strive to improve ourselves, to control our emotions and focus our energies on pleasing God. This is not what's happening in the world at the moment. People are turning to the pleasures of the world, pleasures of their own body, instead of God. So this message goes out to everybody, that we try to help them to understand that this is what you've got to be striving for. As I said, it's um, maybe not be what people want to hear, but that's what they need to hear. And so, as a dialer, this is our job, to call people to God and try to help them to understand. So, as I said, you can bend and understand and support in a little way, but you've got to make sure you don't go too far. You've got to keep those limits up. So all the time, you've got to try and keep thinking and focusing on trying to help them, to bring them to God as best you can do. Whether they listen or not, that's up to them. Our duty is only to convey the message. It's up to Allah to open up their hearts to that message. But that's all we can do. So it doesn't matter who the person is. It's the same journey we all take. We all need to understand. But as I said, that's when I try and speak to a person who's homosexual or something like that, this is what I try to get them to understand, that you've got to start taking this journey to develop your spiritual self and overcome these weaknesses. And this is where, alhamdulillah, fasting, for instance, is very helpful. That it helps you to get control of your body, that you don't give in to the food and drink, but you can control what you eat and what you drink. So this is what they need to understand, whether they want to or not, because like I say, most of these people are already lost to the world. They're already lost to the pleasures of the body. So they don't want to hear such messages. I'm sure when you do Tabligh, you're finding this, whoever you're conveying it, the message to. But that's what we got to be trying to do. Right, Mariam, she wanted to speak because she's put her hand down. Okay, right.
There's a question being sent, basically. Yeah, sorry. The question is there any verse in the Holy Quran specifically refuse the argument that indeed some people are born gay?
Well, some people are born gay. How can we refute it? This is nature. I mean, as I said, if there's some people have this idea that, oh, we can give you some medicine, we can cure you of this, and so on and so forth. There are two types of people, as I mentioned. Some people are born gay. You can see that. You know, you can see even a young child, the way they move in, the outlook and everything like that, that they are more, the genes are wrong, they're more inclined to the opposite sex. But as I said, there are others who it becomes just following like sheep. It's a fashion. They get caught up, the bisexual or whatever, they want to experiment, and they get involved. So those people can change, of course, because they are not that way inclined. They're just enjoying running after the pleasures of life. But a person who is born inclined, so yes, it's there. And I don't know of any verses, because that is nature. Some people are born that way. And we understand this. I never say to someone that they aren't born that way. If they are born that way, they are born that way. I just say that there are some people who aren't born that way. Some people who are straight but still have relations outside the marriage, whether it is with a woman, with a man, or same sex, whatever. But to say that they haven't been born that way, no, I don't think there's any verse that will say that, if I've understood you correctly.
There's another question which is being asked in the chat. What does Islam say about people who are incompetent?
All right. I mean, that's again a medical condition. I don't know what kind of answer you want to give me to give here. I mean, if a person can't have children, they can't have children. I mean, we see, for instance, the Ibrahim, Hazrat Ibrahim, he, his wife was barren, and thinking who it is now, Elijah, not Elijah, Elizabeth and Zachariah. And alhamdulillah, Allah bless them. But yeah, some people obviously they can't have children for whatever reason. That's unfortunate. I mean, you can have adoption and things like that if you can't have children. There is nowadays medicine that can help, but that doesn't mean that it's going to fix everything. Sometimes it doesn't happen. You've still got to be inclined that way. So it's just a helper. I don't know what else I can say. Yeah, it happens. It's life. Miriam, you want to say something now?
Yes, Assalamu alaikum, Rahab.
Welcome, Salam.
As follow-up from my question I asked earlier, I mean, I was just thinking, it's so hard for somebody who is, like you were saying, naturally born, to say that, okay, even though I'm born like this, I'm going to, this is what Allah wants, and so this is the way I should be leading my life. I'm just thinking, how Allah is placing such burden on such people, while generally the majority of the people are born otherwise, and in a normal way that is deemed like we created you in pairs, and that you have to reproduce. So I don't know how we can explain that. Okay, for you, yours was like this, and so that is actually how Allah made it for you. And why would Allah create such people in that way? I mean, I really find it very hard to sort of understand.
I mean, let's take it a different way. I mean, people say that why doesn't Allah stop wars? Why doesn't Allah stop famines, diseases, and things like this? But the thing is that we need to understand that Allah has given us free will, the opportunity to make choices ourselves. Now, the alternative to that is that Allah will force his will, which means he takes away the choice. So what do you want? Do you want the ability to choose, or do you want to be forced and everything happens? So if Allah wanted, he could force everyone to be straight. Yeah, Allah can do anything, of course. If Allah wanted, he could force everyone to be good. Why have evil? There's no need for evil. But Allah doesn't. He's created this system for us to develop. This is what Allah wants. He wants us to develop from that lower self to a higher self. And so he's given us choice. So Allah will not, he's made it very clear, he will not force his will on anybody. He will not force these things to happen. He has created us, and sometimes it happens that people are this way inclined. Yes, no doubt. Sometimes it happens that people are very bad, very evil. Yes, it happens. Sometimes people are very good. It happens. But it's all for us to make the choices on how we do our life. A good person sometimes makes a wrong choice and does bad. A bad person sometimes makes a choice of doing good. So it's within everyone. We've all got this ability to choose. So a person this way inclined, yes, it's unfortunate he's that way inclined, but he's got choices on what he does then. Does he act upon his impulses, in his inclination, or does he control himself? And yes, it may not be that he then is enjoying it as much as he may enjoy it with a person of his own sex, but he can still, as I said, he can still enjoy a person's companionship, and he can still have children. If he doesn't have children, he can still have that companionship. So it is possible. It's not that he can't do it. He chooses not to do it. So our answer is, don't choose not to do it, choose to do it. This is the way for you. It's the only way for you. This is what God wants. So develop your relationship with God. If you develop your relationship with God, then you strive to please God. But if you don't develop a relationship with God, then of course you'll run after these worldly things, and you have to be answerable for that. So this is the only answer that I say. It's a question which people don't like to hear the answer, whatever it is, whether it's, like I say, homosexual or whatever. But the answer we always have to do is run after winning the pleasure of Allah. That is always the answer for God-fearing people to give.
Assalamualaikum Muhtarim Maulam Sahab.
Welcome, Salam. Yes, sorry.
Hi, Jazakallah. Mr. Over here. Apologies, I was in another meeting, but just a quick one to chip in. Beloved Huzul, the current Huzul, Khalifatul Masih Khamis, Ayadullah bin Aziz, in regard to gay, I remember watching his answer, and he did mention to refer in regard to the treatment. So I think I'm sure that most of the time it's important for us as well to look at what the current Khalifa or Khulafa they are answering. The other thing which we have to be careful.
Sorry, 1 second. What treatment are you talking about?
Talking for the treatment of the gay or bisexuality.
Okay, what treatment?
I'm not sure, but definitely I remember
I don't know of any treatment. I say there are people who say that there is some treatment. I don't know if there's any doctors with us today. I'm not aware of any medicine that can cure a person being homosexual.
Yeah, Saba was just sharing. I definitely had Beloved Huzu answering for however clip it was. Well, I think he was in Canada, but I can't fully tell. And the other thing is that I know that there are some people who are born that way, whether they're gay or lesbian, whatever it is. But sometimes the Holy Quran says, "Kunuma as as well," that be among the righteous. There are some things which sometimes people have learned because of watching movies and watching this and that, and then they want to try out, which ends up actually destroying their life. So I wanted to make that Zakmas.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like I say, this is the society we're living in today, and it's unfortunate. Alhamdulillah, we got MTA, but most TV programs do not encourage you to run after God. Instead, they encourage you to do other things. So I feel very sorry for the youngsters of today, the society they're growing up in. But I remember the fourth Khalifa, Rahmullah, once said in a different thing that a person from Pakistan, or maybe it was India in those days, sent his son to get educated in the UK. And unfortunately, he started doing things which he should have done. And then the father in poetry or something like that criticized the son that why have you done this? Why you've gone against God and so on and so forth. And he answered back, they said, look, you chucked me in the water and you wonder why I'm drowning. So obviously, you've put me into society. What do you expect? So it is difficult for all the youngsters growing up in this society. It's a great jihad. There's so much pressure on them in every direction, whether it's their friends, whether it's the magazines, it's TV, the internet these days, of course. But this is the jihad that we've got to do. As for the treatment, the only treatment I say that I know of is to bring people to God. And that's the best treatment that we can give. I'm not aware, I may be wrong, I'm not aware of any physical treatment that you can give, any medicine or anything like this, because it's not a disease. A person's born that way. But like I say, if the fifth Khalifa has said such a thing, and I think I've heard him say such a thing, I don't know what he's referring to, so I don't know what he means by that. Okay, anything else, or should we finish it there? Okay, it's been a lively discussion today. This is what I like to see, that people are contributing, giving ideas. As I said, this is a particular difficult situation, subject to convey, because it's one of those which people don't want to hear the answer. And so we'll constantly come back at you and say, no, this is wrong, this is wrong. But as I said, this is what the only thing we can do is try to guide them as to why they need to run after Allah. Right, so as I normally say, if anybody's got any topic like this one, anybody else got anything they would like to for us to discuss, please let us know and contact either Toby, Zaid or Rabir, and inshallah we'll try and we'll try and do that topic in the near future. So please, let's finish now and join me in silent prayer. Okay, Bismillah. I'm surrounding. Amen. Okay, assalamu alaikum.